What's the date?
The date is
26th of July. Okay.
26th of July.
And
The air on our plane is going into the pod.
wow.
Woo!
Okay, get down so she can take a shot. Okay, now talk to the two of you. Hi there.
Are we excited?
Hi. Yeah, we're excited.
Okay, you excited?
Very excited. Look,
Yes, I'm excited.
Are you excited?
Yeah, we're here. We're all here.
after a
What are you up to, Linda?
We're here. We made it. Late. Plenty of time, right?
Fast, Linda.
בשם חברת אל על, הקברניט וצוות המטוס, אני מודה לכם על ההקשבה ושתהיה לנו יופי של טיסה.
Fine, Dad, I'm fine. I think I can handle it. Dad, never mind. Oh, thank you. That will in the recordings.
Airport. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop and the fasten seatbelt sign is turned on.
That's a little pool thing.
Hi. What archaeological site in Tel Aviv? We're at the Haaretz Museum
Dad,
and the hotel.
how did this stay in perfect position?
It's buried under right there. Olive trees. And there are also fig trees and cactus fruit is growing all in this area. And also some vines for grapes. Hey! Oh, probably grain, right? It's probably not liquid because if you have a vat over near the oil press for any kind of liquids. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to Israel.
Take a picture of it.
So this was the building of this.
So what are the holes for? Do they keep like idols in there or something? They may have made sacrifices in those holes. Maybe.
Why would we keep
Eric,
Might have
this
been-
is not Jewish.
It
This is
might have been for
Palestinian.
supports for a roof.
It's true.
You know, they might have had. wooden
Actually, it says
slats.
there are benches along the sides, so maybe they weren't so much holes as wells for where benches should be.
Yes.
See the altar in the back, the Mizbeach?
No.
Yeah.
There's only one Mizbeach. Doesn't that look like a leg? That little rock? Yeah, it does. Maybe it's an idol. Hey, check it out. Look at the rock. Eric.
They own It's a cooperative.
זה שלום למצלמה.
Gary?
אתה מדבר על תפחיד אותי?
מה את עושה?
He's giving America a bad name. America against Israel. I'm ashamed to be Jewish. אני אביא לך עוד actually.
Eric?
I didn't say it.
אבל הם משחקים עכשיו, לא נפריע להם. הם משחקים עכשיו, אחר כך אנחנו. קודם כל הם, אחר כך אנחנו. בנושקה.
Actually, I was quite ingenious. Don't do that! No, don't tease me! You're for snickers!
Gary?
Time during the days of Tiberium, that means during the days when the Emperor Tiberium, or the word Tiberius, the city of Tiberius, which the name comes. When Emperor Tiberium, who was the emperor of Rome during the time of Jesus, was emperor, there was Pontius Pilate. We still have concerts here. I saw the New York City production of Chorus Line. I saw Bob Dylan, remember him? Yeah. He sang here. Remember Bob Dylan? This is a theater, and not to be confused with amphitheater. Amphitheater, we'll see an amphitheater on our travels. We went to Beit Shan. But this is a theater. Theater means a place where you saw shows, not a place where you saw gladiators fighting gladiators or animals or the bloody stuff that we all know about that took place within. Major spring that would provide enough water for Caesarea would have to come from a spring about 20 miles away in the area of Shuni, an Arab in a Jewish town. If you hadn't noticed, Zichron Yaakov with its red rooftops, pointed red rooftops, sitting on the very crest of the hill, while the cement. By the way, if you were to
Jezreel Valley on the way to Megiddo.
Rothschild did anything? No,
Did we do anything with any archaeological digs?
not that I know of.
Or just find one?
Today, the Rothschild Foundation does. This now would have been the main entrance as we went through an arched area, and a covered area with parapets as you would have entered into the city. Now this is already been able to position themselves as we walk in. You could see the advantage point that they would have over us if we were an enemy.
This is the archaeological trench that determined the various strata.
Over
Have
towards
war.
the left of that, you can see the bridge, of course, centered right on where during the days of the Canaanites human sacrifices were made. Now it's interesting that in terms of human sacrifice, where we have a number of archaeologists that have an argument in terms of what they believe Marduk, the god.
Here's where wild calips have been known to come up over the wall and attack tourists.
Private hoarding of one's own to a public grain silo is probably a necessity of the situation, considering that this was a place that was constantly under attack, and that the only solution for taking care of their eating needs, what's considered the southern stables, as opposed to the northern stables, which was on the other side of the city.
About how many chariots and horses?
You won't even feel it.
I know it. I know it.
By the end of the day, you'll figure.
Mr. Stark, the door.
Goes back to the earlier legends, going back to
Yeah, but this is even deeper.
This is the source of where the water came from, the original spring. Now, most of you, I think you're probably aware of how a spring forms. Generally, the way it works is that there's the water cycle. The rain falls onto the earth. The water flows through what we call aquifers, which would be porous rock, and so finally finds an.
Oh, excuse me.
Right there, by the white rock.
Of Akko, you'll find that, like we were talking about outside, that the Phoenicians and then later the Greeks continued to live in the 1940s was a courtyard. And if you were here years ago, before they did the excavation here, that's what you would have seen here, is just the courtyard where the prisoners were allowed out 1 hour, and you would have wanted to stay overnight and have your caravan taken care of, stay, of course. Back to the folder Judaism. What happened to Christianity really happened over 300 years after Jesus' death, and the formation of a new religion altogether. At its peak, this is one of the best pieces of Jewish philosophy I've ever read.
Spot.
Blues and the greens and also the hand. You may have seen that over the door if you haven't. Look for it. You might even see a hand print, or you may see it more sophisticatedly done in the form of an actual hand that was carved out or molded.
Generally in Tzfat, it's not a big city, it's a town. We have 67 synagogues.
Well,
Most of them, they're old synagogues, they are Sephardic synagogues. For the people who come from Spain, they're about 300 years before they are Ashkenazi. I, for example, I'm the fifth generation. About 180, 170 years. But they're all natives from Tzfat, not the first one. He's from the Jews who come, the refugees from Spain. But they're not in this quarter. One of the greatest rabbis of Tzfat, who made Tzfat to be a very Jewish religious and Jewish knowledge, is the Rabbi Tzfat. Every Jew in the world, no different if it's Ashkenazi or Sephardi, Yemenite,
עברית? אנגלית?
אנגלית, בבקשה.
איך הם מבינים עברית? אתה תסביר באנגלית, אנחנו נתרגם.
אין בעיה. So the work, normally we see the braiding, רואים את השזירה, את כל העבודה. But we received a huge order for New York Hanukkah candles. Very big order, so the staff, people working here, they simply made the wrapping and the other building. Everything is from pure beeswax. This is the honeycomb. In Israel, they separate honey and beeswax for the greasy blocks of beeswax. They melt them, and the work is everything by hand. They roll cotton strings of the frame, they put on the carousel, and this is the method of dipping into melted wax. The more they dip, there's a thin layer of wax with sticks on the wick. To obtain an average Shabbat candle, we need about 20-25 dips. 25 דבילות בתור דונג טבעי נמס. ביד. כל דבילה, not a specialist of the coloring, just to show you, this is the blue, this is the red, this is the orange.
Wow. So
when the candles are warm, they get very soft and very pliable, and they make it hot. Havdalah candles. On Saturday night, we make Hidur mitzvah, a nicer mitzvah. More wicks, bigger flame. Hidur. This is made of 18 wicks, high, life. This is a unique creation from here into the candle, just like clay. זה כדור של דונג. They have put cloves, spices, besamim. We bless on the wine, we bless on the candle, and we bless on the spices, and the candles do not drip, so it won't pour on the nose if you want to smell the spices. This is really a special Barbara. Now the second product we use, even they told Rama, she's our artist, she knows exactly how to do it.
This is the natural color. Blue. This is red. So where would you like color?
Blue going up to here, and covering half of it, kind of.
Okay.
Okay, and you want any yellow on it?
Yeah, yellow, trying to get it up on
Then
top.
and if we mix the blue and yellow, we'll get some green as well. Alright, so I'm going to dip it into here. It's a little bit greeny color because of the yellow of the wax.
The yellow and the green.
Right.
And then
Turn upside down, we'll do the yellow and get some green.
יפה מאוד.
And if we do a little red here, we'll get some red here.
And it's something else.
And you want some red on the bottom or purple? No. If we put it in red, we'll go a little bit purple.
Yeah, we will put it like this.
Like a rainbow.
Oh, it's a beautiful candle.
Eric, what do you say?
Thank you.
Regarding mezuzahs on the door, etc. This one has a mezuzah on the door because, first of all, the room itself, the synagogue, is used more than just for prayer. It's used for hagigot, for parties, for eating and sleeping in here. And you can see even the way the cushion chairs are prepared. It's not like the pews that you saw in the Ashkenazi, or for that matter, anything compared to the synagogues that you probably would attend. Here behind you over here, this closet, this is the Geniza. This is the Geniza. Every synagogue will have a Geniza. Of course, in most synagogues, what they'll do is every couple of years. It's similar to what you saw in the Ashkenazi synagogue. That was something else that Shimon had mentioned, that it was unusual to see a bama that size and the height in an Ashkenazi synagogue. In the Sephardic synagogue, it is. So we're just trying to do it out in the regular Ashkenazi synagogue. Notice also on the wall, as you can see, from Toledo, a Torah scroll that goes back to the 1500s. Which means that this is very old parchment that you're looking at, and one that, though this particular Torah itself may not be used because of its being fragile, it's certainly displayed, just like with all the other Torah scrolls that they have in the Yom. Really at the source of it, there's times when it gets rougher, and very early. One council here.
C'est comme ces mecs qui sont au téléphone.
He looked out over the valley, and the first thing he says to me, he says, "You'd have to be crazy to want to give up the Golan Heights." He says the advantage point, no matter, and he looks at me and he says, from a point of view of a senator of the United States government, I can tell you that don't let anybody ever try to convince you that the Golan Heights are not important because it's not usable in a conventional war. This is a senator of the United States, and we have been bombarded over the course of these last years by just about every would-be military expert who tells us that the Golan on the other side of the Golan Heights, because that's where the border is with Syria.
So which border?
This is Israel.
But further back, is there what country's border?
This is all Israel, going straight back into the Mediterranean Sea. From here,
Headed down.
you know, we'll take the map out so you'll be able to see where we are.
Dad. We're not. That means Lebanon's like that one? That means like Lebanon's that one?
Lebanon is right over there. Right.
No, Misty Mountains over there is Lebanon?
No, the Misty Mountains are not top.
Should we, Daddy? Should we buy this, Dad?
This kind of.
Swimming in Yam Kineret. Gary? Gary? Linda? Eric?
Regular people find rocks.
The mountains on the eastern side of Yam Kineret.
לפני שאתה עולה, אני יכול. אני יכול.
Before you have to go back and everything, don't be sitting there all closed. Just use, I'll give you the one before they pop, just a great big strap. Just use those things. If you need, I'll give you like an extra bag, put maybe, other stuff in.
David?
I think you can swim in less.
A little bit, yeah.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Here's our secret watches. Here's our wonderful waters. Here's our wonderful cars.
Alone to find an amphitheater is very difficult. There are two of them. There's one here in Beit Shan and one in Beit Green. And that indicates that the two cities, Beit Green and Beit Shan, were significant cities, so significant in the Roman Empire that they warranted an amphitheater. Now what's the difference between the amphitheater that we're looking at now and the theater, for example, that we saw in Caesarea, or the theater that we're going to see here in Beit Shan? And the answer to that really has to do with what went on in the theater and what went on in the amphitheater. In the theater, of course, we already learned that the activity was acting, that there was a show. That show may have gone on from morning till night, but it was a show nevertheless, and the blood and guts that we hear about in Roman society didn't take place in those theaters. In the amphitheater, it did. The people would sit in the keve, like the keve that we sat in the theater. The keve here, though, sits around the lip of the Colosseum, known as the amphitheater. Now, the vomitoria, in the case of the amphitheater, were those doors that you see at the bottom. And they were only for animals or for the activities of the gladiators as they came out into the center of the ring. The animals would be... Now, I can't give my own personal feelings about that, but I could. I just don't agree. However, as far as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was concerned, as long as there was one person trying to save a life, he was able to sit here and watch this barbarity go on. First thing you do on an archaeological dig is you balk.
You what?
You balk. I don't want to do it. No, balking is a gridiron system that you literally tie strings from longitudinal and latitudinal lines and you label them. You label them A, B, C, the latitude and
See what this whole thing is? Look, the whole thing over there.
exciting aspect of Roman life and what the Romans contributed to society in general was the idea of community planning. Generally, in Roman tradition, cold room, the warm room, and the hot room, known as the frigidarium, the tepidarium, and the coldarium, you would enter in and now there's still an argument. The dirty water was taken out of the city this way and entered into the main streams at the end of the stream where water was no longer being siphoned off for use, and it washed down to the Jordan River. We entered just now. Although there probably were a lot of exits and you could have gotten out of the city in many different places, the real entrance onto the Cardo then would have been from that side, and then it was interrupted by a
dedication to the governor of the area, Palladius.
Okay. That doesn't mean that it was easy to put down.
Oh, my.
You can always tell
Pretty
the
pattern.
cost of a mosaic floor by the size of the stones. In other words, if each of the cubes are larger, and these are pretty large cubes for a mosaic, in the corners, it was known as Gekimanos. And those were places where there was fountains and shops, and it was like an intersection in New York City. Now we're looking also at residences here. Although the well-to-do of the city was has already, the residential neighborhood for them has already been uncovered up by those trees right over there. We discovered several mansions, and that would have been the Beverly Hills of this of Beit Shan.
Columns, so that they actually made shops out of it rather than the reflecting pool. Yeah.
Play ball.
Play ball, huh? And
So
these guys are doing some restoration over here.
So this is below ground?
And this is all below ground. What do you mean below ground? No, this is ground level. This is above ground.
It was below ground till they dug it out.
Oh, they got seats on the other side.
Crossing the skies. You have whole Akedat Mitzvah. Well, Akedat Mitzvah is a man used in the past as being a representation of the Geula. It's just like Yitzchak Avinu was saved in the end. For being sacrificed. In the same way, Am Yisrael represents the Geula, the eventual redemption.
There you go, we're at Sofna, Oasis, in the north. Eric? Eric? Everybody comes to
Hi, Eric. Eric. Eric.
I don't see you.
Yeah.
Eric, look over here and then come out now, please.
Okay.
Reaching like Jericho and areas of that, which are even under Palestinian Authority. And we will pick up a soldier. Cheryl.
Right here.
The Balfour Declaration essentially stated that the British looked at if there have been any farms, small little farms, these are Arab farms. The kibbutzim, well actually moshavim in this area, have done most of what you see in terms of the greenery. And they took hiding in the home of Rahav the harlot. Two Jewish boys on the most important mission in.
So you pass by Jericho, which has been closed down due to terrorist bombings.
Pathways that have been carved out over hundreds of years by sheep and goats that have been herded by the Bedouins who live in this area over these hills. Hotels. The smell never forgets.
Say, just take it. Did you see the huts? The animals?
So it became part of the tradition that as Jews came to Jerusalem, we would walk. So okay, we didn't walk the whole mountain, but we drove up with our bus, and physically getting off the bus before we go anywhere else, and we come to a point where from the north we can overlook our city. Then we are symbolically making that aliyat haregel. And as we do stand here, and over the next couple of days begin to absorb the magnificence of this magnificent city, we have to remember when it all started.
Finished product. Thank you very much. And tell me your name again, please.
James.
Thank you very much. This is Dawn in Jerusalem from our balcony. Okay.
Overlooking the old city in the east and the rest of the hills around Jerusalem. And it was a good place for an army base and a place where they could have this advantage. During the days of the British, when the British conquered Israel and established their British mandatory government, they also established themselves a base right here on this hill because of its tradition already and also because of the locations. All of your trees.
Wow. Take this one. We'll get some more.
Not here. You worry about it.
Okay, they're choosing their trees. for planting here in the Jerusalem forest.
Wait, how many trees did you No. And you guys get some this Christmas thing. Right there. Okay, I think we're all set. We all set? Yep. All right. So,
Yalla, David. This side, and I'll take a picture of you two also.
you should go. Should we take it out of the bag?
Plástico.
What did it say?
Oh no, you guys go off on the road.
How do you do it? Mostly like that.
Right here.
All the ones he's thrown down.
Red went deeper
Well, I
than
didn't
that.
see what it. You got more, Leonard? Go ahead.
These two, starting
And there's two more
Can't do
there.
it.
Eric, just pull it off, sweetie.
Can't.
Okay, then
Okay,
rip
put
it
some
off.
dirt around it, Karen.
Can't. Get it right here?
Trees behind you.
Lid.
Careful, right behind you.
Eric,
Yeah.
let's see.
Siva's tree.
Watch out.
This is Siva's tree. Simcha.
Coming down, David. Watch out.
Okay.
I know I didn't
out of the
bring it
plastic.
today. I didn't want to schlep it. I should.
Okay.
But she'll make
Which one did you plant right there, Gary?
Eric, pat down the dirt, sweetie.
I guess, man.
Look at me.
No, that's not
Eric,
that's
pat down the
Larry.
dirt. Look at
That's
me.
Grandpa Larry.
Eric, pat down.
certificates. Not carrying anything.
Look at me.
All right. Next one is Nana's.
Okay.
No, I mean next one's a Nana of the trip. I have Nana's. And Siva's.
Okay.
Easy cheesy.
Okay, put it in there.
Yep.
This is Nana's.
Don't let the things blow away. Don't want to litter here on top of everything else.
Yeah, falling temple.
Gary,
The cat.
let's see you do that. Eric, let's see you dig it. Gary, let's see you dig it.
It seems. Oh, very much so, Mom. Mom, did you plant yours yet?
No.
And what are all those?
These two are going to be ours.
Pick it up. Lenny, go ahead. So they're not enough. I don't have that far back up there.
Don't hurt the tree, though.
Careful, careful.
I'm just getting the goat though, so.
Yeah, I know.
Eric, take a look at me, sweetie.
What do you think?
However you want to
Linda.
take a picture, honey. Hi.
I'm like a little girl.
From this one
Of thy godness and thy grace. Give due of goodness, godness. Give due for a blessing and cause benefit rains, beneficent rains to fall in their season. To
Satiate.
satiate. Can I read the Hebrew?
Go right ahead.
Mountains of Israel, and her valleys, and water thereon every planted tree, and these saplings, which we plant therefore these
Where they stay. Let's find the Hebrew for the last time.
I'll make Shoshehem Begadel, Haram, Haman Yirfu, Haman Yiratzon, Tov Sha'ar Etzei Israel, Bracha U'Tahara, Tifara rather, Yitchazek Yidei Kol Achenu, Ha'amenim Ba'avodat Adama, HaKodesh U'Parchat, Shimamta. Barech Adonai Elam, Koal, Dam, Kirtzeh, Hashkiva, Eman, Hajecha Min HaShemayim, Marem et Amcha et Yisrael, ואת האדמה אשר נתת לנו כאשר נשמעת לאבותינו.
Amen. Simin tov, mazel tov, and mazel tov, and simin tov. Oh, 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 ay, 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 ay. Oh, 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 oh.
You may have got it coming up, but just in case.
Which is called the Kennedy Forest.
Right now.
95. In memory of Robert. That was in
85, Marilyn Monroe.
Sick.
Most people don't.
Well, I know that, but
The entrance to the Valley of the Communities at Yad Vashem.
How many people in Catskill? Susnovich?
When the heck you see Susnovich? Oh, yeah, Susnovich.
Dad.
Wow.
Carnipole, so maybe they got Zlotchev and Carnipole from Tom's brothers lived. That's what we heard.
So why don't we gather together here? And Edita both, they had lost a son at Auschwitz named Uziel. And he having survived and she having done economically very nicely after the war, establishing themselves in California, decided that they wanted to repay the Jewish people in many ways that they could, and one we could understand how they could wage war against the Jewish people as a nation. Why the children? What could they possibly have seen as the children's guilt?
Generation.
And the answer, candles, these 5 candles would have been the age of Uziel, flickering off of the reflections in the mirrors, casting an image as if there were 1.5 million flickers of light. It could have been bonfires in the houses of Jerusalem as we exit and see the contrast. Reminds us of Korchik, who was a Polish Jew, director of an orphanage, a doctor, a Dr. Seuss of his time. European nations done, we certainly would have avoided the catastrophe that occurred to us. King Christian was also ready to pass a law that had the Jews remained, and that this was unsuccessful, they would have worn yellow armbands, and everyone in Denmark would have worn yellow Jewish armbands, because as King Christian said, we have no Jews in Denmark, we only have Danes. And
no, not Shama, this way. Come on in here. No, this is the
Here's our Herzl. We have his tomb.
not to be buried in an elaborate tomb, so that he wouldn't be made into a god. And single battle, whether it was in the Negev or whether it was in the northern part of the country, in the Galilee. Yitzhak Rabin was forged into becoming a great military leader. There was a...
Here we are at the Supreme Court today. Jerusalem stone in the Hall of Arches represents the ancient, and the white arches look out onto the future. And outside, you see the bridge that will lead one day to the new Tachanat Merkazi, the central bus and train station, directly to accesses to this building, the new Supreme Court.
What? Let's get somebody.
And then with the gardens.
You see, it starts from this part, from a piece of a sheet of silver, and we're spinning it, make it the shape that we want. Yes, it's different shapes like this, or the other one that you saw there, ready like this shape. And after that we put all the figure on here. For example, you see, for example, this tray, it's come plain. You saw it there with the filigree. Now we prepare the frame here of the leg of the cup. Put it here, and then after those small pieces, we put it on the tray or on the cup. It's the French design. Different. This different one. And this is different. You see? No. This is, for example, it's different.
I see. Yes.
This is made by hand, and then we solder it, with a fire on the cup or on the tray. This is twist.
Wow.
Or making a zigzag. Zigzag like this. You see on the back?
Here.
You see this zigzag, short eyes, the zigzag. Here also zigzag.
קיפאון מדיני ולאובדן האמון בינינו לבינם, שזה מה שעשינו, אנחנו עושים צעדים נטולי כל משמעות. האם באמת מישהו חושב שהסגר הזה עוזר למלחמה בטרור? גם באמצעים של קיטום התהליך המדיני. תודה רבה לך, חבר הכנסת שרוד. מוקד התנועה של כל ישראל לחזות בערכו, מפעילת כוכבית 007, מוקד שירות לכל נוסעי הפנאי והחירום. טלפון, ותשיג רייטינג ברשת מוטורולה סנטר. איפה יש לי שם? חיים בטלפון, כוכבית 9333, ויאמרו לך אחד. כוכבית 9333. אתם תסבירו שימור בביתי. שתייה, מתקלבים, מחוץ לנו.
Then to salad. To buy the silver.
They buy it and they don't forget.
He has to speed it up now.
Okay, this is our room at the Sheraton. Dining area. Here's the living room where the boys have slept. Get back to the view in a second. Okay, the hallway. First closet. bathroom. Bathrobes. And slippers. And one balcony off the bedroom. Shy occupant. Second balcony off the bedroom, which actually extends full length. And a very scenic view.
Discussions for the groups that come through. But what you're looking at, first of all, the western wall over here. Here's that protrusion that I was explaining about when we were in the museum. You'll see it again in the model. That was where the staircase was, the Robinsons. Hold on, Sammy. And that would have been a staircase that went right down into the Tyropian Valley. It was called the Cheesemongers.
Stones found since they fell.
When did they close that? Because we have been up there. When did they close that?
Towards the north, it looks like this. The first thing that he has to do before he starts the building of a temple on the mountain is to straighten it out. How does he do that? He excavates by the north, fills the deep part with arches, and creates one united surface.
Yes. How long did you time for?
It would be a good idea.
On top of it is the temple, and right opposite is the western hill, or the upper city. Between these two mountains is a deep valley, which is called the Tyropian. And now we have two problems. First of all, we all know that Jerusalem has a severe problem with water. Where did they bring the water from up to the temple? From Solomon pools, on the southern part of Beit Lechem. So it's not so hard for the water to flow down the mountains, but it's a bit more difficult for them to climb up the Temple Mount. So what do? They built a bridge connecting these two mountains. And on the bridge, they built an aqueduct, and that's how the water can reach the temple. But they built a bridge for another reason. Who lived up there by the Western Hill, what today is the Jewish quarter? All the important people of the Jewish nation. Not only that, but King Herod built his castle up there. The priests, the Levites, the Kohanim, they had to get to Beit HaMikdash. They had to get to the temple. So not only is it not comfortable to walk all the way down into the valley and start climbing up, it's not honorable. So what do? A bridge. And on the bridge, they built a passageway, and that's how the people can reach the temple. Later, in the 7th century, the Muslims come to Jerusalem. We all know the Temple Mount turns holy to them. They build the Dome of the Rock, the Golden Dome, and the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. And now it's very easy for them to rebuild that same bridge. So take a look. Here's one arch. And whoever looks further down is going to be able to see 6 more arches. Part of them are blocked. But these arches are the basis. In the 13th century, the Mamelukes come to Jerusalem. Mamelukes to us are like Muslims. The Temple Mount is holy to them, and they decide that they want to live on the same level of the Temple Mount. So what do? They start building their homes on top of the bridge because they don't live down here deep in the valley in the Tyropian. So they start building their homes on top of this bridge. Not only that, later on, they started to widen the bridge, and now they fill the entire valley with arches on top of arches, and on top of those arches, they build their homes. They pick up their city. They build a city in the air. So what we're going to do today, we're not going to go crawling, we're not going to go underneath the ground. We're going to be walking on the ground, but underneath those arches that the Mamelukes built here in Jerusalem 700 years ago in order to raise the city. So we're able to see bars, and behind the bars a lot of earth and stone. The first people who come here are British. In the past century, Warren and Wilson, they come here and they reveal a few things that we're going to be able to see later on. But after the Six-Day War, 1967, when the Jewish people returned to this part of Jerusalem, the Ministry of Religious Affairs takes among themselves the task of revealing the entire length of the Western Wall. But when they come here, this is what they find. All the tunnels until the top were filled with this, stones and earth. It took them 15 years to clear out these tunnels. Of course, everything was done by hand. They didn't use any tractors or anything because they didn't know what was going on here. They didn't know what to expect.
An example of the built-up rubble. Sometimes Mamelukes filling in the valley.
talking about the model, I'd like to start from the beginning of Jerusalem as a city. King David comes, he conquers a small mountain from the Jebusites and turns it into the city of David. Years later, his son Solomon is the one who builds the first temple on Mount Moriah. We hear that that temple is so beautiful that people from all over the world, Jewish and Mitzvah, return and see the second temple. They cry when they see it. It's not it. Kingdoms come up and down here in Jerusalem, and in the year 37 BCE, King Herod comes to Jerusalem. And he decides to put in all his time and money and effort in rebuilding the Jewish temple. But the first thing that he has to do before he starts the building, the bedrock of the mountain looks like this, deep in the south and rises towards the north. King Herod excavates by the north, fills the deep part with arches, and creates one united surface. So now 88 feet. Through the western wall, there were 4 entrances. Through the western wall, there were 4 entrances into the area of the Temple Mount. The first entrance over here, as we see coming up, is a large staircase. What's left today of this large staircase is a small arch. Today we call it Robinson's Arch. The next entrance is Barclays Gate. The third one is the big bridge, which connects to you. You are sitting by the western hill. It connects you straight across to the temple. And the fourth entrance, down here, Warren's Gate. Take a look. When the Mamelukes come to Jerusalem, they don't want to live down. Now if I'm going to try to peel off, here, I'm peeling away. I'm going to take away the house on top of us. What am I going to find? If I move away these homes, part of the Muslim quarter, what am I going to find? And underneath the arches, ourselves, the tunnels. So here we are. We're moving away these homes.
We're under those homes.
Here, we came in through the praying area. Deep in the south and go up towards the north. These lights show us the bedrock of the mountain. Today, during our tour, we're going to be walking more or less in a straight line through these orange tunnels, through the orange lights. Okay? So if we're going to be walking on a straight line, and the bedrock is deep in the south and rises towards the north, the ellipse further on in, a fence which surrounded the area of the temple. The fence of the area right in front of it is called in Hebrew, Hachel v'Hasoleh. Also Gentiles, non-Jewish people were allowed into this area. But when they came into this area of the Temple Mount, they were allowed up to this area, up to this fence. Jewish people were allowed deeper into this area, which is called the women's section. The reason it's called the women's section is not because only women were allowed into this area. Men were allowed in here too. The thing was that men, under special circumstances, were allowed further on in through this gate into the Israel section. But when women came to the temple, they were allowed only to this area. And that's why it's called the women's section. Here we see the 15 stairs. The Levites used to stand on the stairs and sing the 15 songs that King David wrote entering this area. The closest we can get to the spot, to the place of the Holy of Holies, where the Holy of Holies used to be, is from the Western Wall. Look how close it is. So right, everything is close. The Western Wall, the Southern Wall, everything is close. But the closest wall to the place of the Holy of Holies is the Kotel Malachi. This stone is 13.6 meters, the height is 2.5, and the depth of this stone is 4 meters. How much does it weigh in tons? 300, yes? How much?
One stone. 100.
What? How much? How much? Okay, 570 tons. How do they bring such a large stone? We said before that the bedrock of the mountain is deep in the south and rises towards of us as an arch. What's on top of this arch? The Muslim home. What's comfortable for them to store down here? Water. The thing was that the water leaks through the western wall. So what do? They stick cement to the western wall, and that prevents the water from leaking through. The problem was that the stones of the western wall are so smooth that the cement didn't hold, it didn't stick. So what do? They make holes in the western wall. And into each hole they put a stone, like you see right over there. Please show us. Thank you. Right over there. Later on, when they pour the cement over these stones, the pressure of the stones on the cement held the cement close to the western wall and prevented it from the area of the Temple Mount. This is the fourth entrance. Where it looks like the sides could still see Herodian stones, that's still original from the time of the Second Temple. Behind this wall is a cave, which leads straight into the area of the Temple Mount. Documents from Cairo testify to the fact that after the destruction of the temple, this was the main synagogue of the Jewish people here in Jerusalem, in this cave. This is where they had to pray for the tunnel, couldn't they build a synagogue? The thing was that they knew how close the spot is to the place of the Holy stone is the golden dome, the dome of the rock. How come it's called the dome of the rock? Because underneath it, you can see the foundation stone coming out of the ground. Of course, it's not a rock, it's not something you can pick up. It's part of the bedrock of the mountain. It reaches the peak, and that peak is the foundation stone. So again, today, without entering the area of the Temple Mount, this is the closest spot we could get to the place of the Holy of Holies. But whoever looks down there, sees there's a hole in the wall. Whoever looks down there is going to be able to look. I'll show you. Right in here. Right in here. Whoever looks inside is going to be able to see a Herodian stone. That's part of the western wall, but it's blocked by this wall. But what we're going to do now, we're working on a straight line, therefore we're going to be able to meet it. But because it's so narrow, I won't stop. When I get there, I'll show the person standing right in back of me.
Before. I should say after it appears. And then the pure Herodian stone. You can see the frame of the Herodian stones coming out in this shot.
The bedrock of the mountain, you can't go over this. What happened was that King Herod reaches this spot, and he can't break into the bedrock of the mountain, but nothing is going to stop King Herod. What does he do? He creates the shape of the Herodian stones in the bedrock of the mountain. So you see here, this is all one unit, this is all one part, this is all part of the bedrock of the mountain. But it seems as if it's a natural continuation of the western wall. Now if you look around, you can see all kinds of very weird things. Look at this stone. After all that King Herod did here, it was so difficult for him to finish his job and take off the stone. Before that, how did they excavate in those days? They used to find a natural crevice in the mountain, in the rock, and they used to water in it, like you see right over here. Later on, they fill it up with little pieces of wood, and they pour water over the wood. What happens to the wood and water? It expands, and the pressure of the wood on the stone broke the stone. So of course, they created 4 of these, one on each side, and that's how they used to excavate in those days. Look behind you, you can see 2 pillars, and one of them you can see a small, people would say tukti. On the walls to the temple, we would hear the songs of the Levites, and look what we're standing on here. This is it. This is the main street of Jerusalem. This is the street which connected the north all the way down to the south. Great scholars of the Jewish nation, like Hillel and Shammai, or Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai here, they walked right over here 2,000 years ago. And no. What they did a year ago was to open up a door at the other side. And that's the reason we didn't go in. They were here, they existed, everything was in there the same way that you can see right now. The problem was that it's very narrow inside. And you can see later on that it's difficult to bring the group in this direction. And when the group in front of us finishes and they turn back, they come back, and you just can't do it. So what we used to do, we used to stop over here and turn back. What they did a year ago was to put in a door at the other side, and now we're able to come in and go out through the other side. What are the Hasmonean tunnels? How come they're called the Hasmonean tunnels? That we'll talk about inside. Okay. We are now in a tunnel which led the water to the temple before the time of King Herod. We said before that King Herod brings the water from Solomon's house, but before the time of King Herod, they brought the water from the north part of Jerusalem. They created these tunnels, and that's how they led the water up to the temple. The truth is, we're not sure from which period these tunnels are. Maybe they're from the time of the first temple. How can we say that? Because look at the top, we could see these stones which were put on top in order to prevent people from falling into the tunnels. This kind of building is known as building that they used to use in the time of the first temple, and maybe that's why these tunnels are probably from the time of the first temple. But because we're not sure, we call these tunnels after the last people who used them. Who were the last people to use the tunnels? Whoever was here before Herod, because King Herod doesn't use the tunnels anymore. He brings the water from Solomon's house. Who was here right before Herod? Right, the Maccabees, the Hasmoneans, and that's why we call the tunnels the Hasmonean tunnels. In this past century, Warren, a British, he comes in here, and he's the first one to reveal the tunnels. In 1985, the Ministry of Religious Affairs make the tunnels ready for tourists and people to come in and walk through. The problem was that there was no door at the other side, and that's why we didn't enter the tunnel.
Down into the deep water areas. Oh my gosh! With access to the water. It needs moving well. Within the Hasmonean. Water down there. See? Tunnels.
What is he going to do with all the water that's in the tunnels? He creates a pool, and in the pool he stores the water. So down here we could see part of that pool. Of course it's a lot larger than what we see right now. It continues behind this wall. Whoever goes across the street to the monastery with the Sisters of Zion and walks all the way down into the basement is going to be able to see the other side of this pool. So please stay with me, try to stay as one group, we'll walk back together.
If you come up here, Linda, be careful, it's wet.
Are you okay?
Yeah, fine, no problem.
At the time, the Jews were not allowed to enter the renamed city of Jerusalem, the Capitolina. Leave the old city by way of Lion's Gate.
Feel a little better?
You see, there's a sign of Jordanian Hills. And this area, what's West Jordan. And we are well below sea level, and all of us are feeling the effects of the years.
And it told you a little bit about life in Qumran, which is where we are right now. There are many parallel stories to be told about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And if I take you, when we go into lunch, there's a great store here, a good bookstore, and you can choose any one of 10 different books that are right now currently available and written by people who have anything to do with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you can compare each story, and each one tells a different story. So we have to try to figure out what is the reality and what is the fantasy, the legends, and where are the possible traps so that we don't fall into them before running off and making our own conclusions. That is very important to say before we look at the historical discovery of the scrolls. First of all, from a traditional point of view, historically, it's accepted that on November 29, 1947, while the UN was sitting in New York debating on the future of the Jewish and the Arab state here in Palestine, that brought him into a cave, and the boy ran after him, and inside found an urn, and in that urn was the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Whether or not that's true or not, I'm not so sure. There could very well have been, and there may be indication that there were various findings of parchments in this area for a while, and had been sold off to antiquities. This is the town, a very small town if you look around at it. And what archaeologists have found here is, first of all, clear indication of communal living, communal dining rooms, communal workspaces, scrolleries, places where they wrote, places where they met, where they even simulated as a synagogue. And all of this took place here. One of the things that is quite obvious is that they were obsessed with water, and you would imagine with the mikvahs that they were having here. They had to bring water in from the mountains, and you can see the gray line. That's where the water falls during the winter time when the water runs. That's where it runs down from. And they were able to capture that water, send it flowing down through the wadi, and then captured it here and brought it through these lines. You can see these water canals, filling up water pools, cisterns, mikvahs, all around.
Laundry.
Certainly, very, very monkish their attitudes and the way they live.
The dwelling places of the Dead Sea sect.
Of the good things of life.
When was this set?
Wadi, a deep wadi.
This is like the
Along the side, separating the tell from the mountain.
Can you go into the cave?
Only with an archaeological exploration you could. But this was it. This, you see, the bottom part was not open. That was done by archaeologists, and it was just like that. So no one would have known that there was a cave there.
Cover it over. Dirt. Here it in, Getty.
There are some
Get a chance to sight Niger.
Some of them produce a berry, some of them
We see a little bit, a hint of what Nachal David can become in the crushing rain. And part of the ibex family. Ibex, come turn around, look at the camera. There we go. You see all the waterfall? The oasis. Again. And a little more to get
Go on, Eric. Go with Gary.
Just wait! Dad, I meant to jump in the water like this.
Here the bamboo grows. Dead Sea. You can see the path of green. Follows Nachal David. David's Wadi. Right along it. Eric, have your watch on. You see here the northern end, Masada, the hanging palace, three-tier palace. Romans would take pictures. See isolation, and you can barely make out the diamond shape of the mountain. Just make out the snake pattern.
Of August at the Nirvana Hotel on the Dead Sea.
גם כנראה המדינה לא עושה כל כך הרבה בשביל תיירות, לא מקדמת. כן עושה? אבל לתיירות אמריקאית.
Gary? Gary?
כי זה שם זול להם להגיע.
Linda?
Hi.
פה גם אין הבעיה של מזג אוויר, פה אין לנו מה להתחתת שמדכאים את האנשים. גם, מה אתה חושב שמה שקרה במקסיקו, בצפון, נדמה לי, שהמרד הזה של בדרום, זה גם כן להוסיף הרבה לתדמית של הזהו, כן? המעשים שעשה הצבא שם, ואיכשהו דיכא את המרד.
What? Let's see. What's that?
Just from the bottom. It's the salt on the bottom here.
כן. שאחר כך קראתי שבכלל לא הייתה שום סיבה, כן. הם הלכו כנראה.
Hi! Dad!
What are you doing down here at the Dead Sea? I just saw you up at the Sea of Galilee and then in Jerusalem. What are you doing?
Hey, Mom.
Yeah.
Eric, let's see. What are you doing, honey?
I'm making a
Let's see it.
sword block for our family. It's a lot of work to make a sword block, especially if you do it by hand.
Linda?
And here we are again. Very nice.
Gary? What are those rocks? What is it? Let's see.
See? Has a lot of holes in it with air exploding.
And what's it doing?
Floating.
Any size. Will that float back home?
From this?
Cold water?
Anywhere you want.
Will
To
it float in
this?
cold water?
So the two brick sizes down there that's floating away.
Look at me for a still picture, guys.
Okay. Let's see. Bye.
Pumice. Oh yeah, it's floating anywhere.
This phenomena. And what it is the type of soil that's here, less, L-O-E-S-S. And because less is so finely particled to it, and you dig your hand into it, you find that it's very rich with clay.
We got the start of our ascent of Masada. The construction and table work. We see the snake path below.
And all of the buildings that you're going to be seeing on Masada, each one had their own cistern. There were cisterns at homes, there were cisterns at palaces, there were cisterns at bathhouses. There was a cistern on this side of the mountain. Now, the way this one would be filled is that the women would have to fetch water from those 12 cisterns, carry it across the Masada, and then fill it into a canal that came through this hole that you see right near the door. Stood on all four sides of each of these storage rooms. And what Yadin found was that in each room, there was a different food storage, whether it was grain or whether it was dried figs and dates, and pits were left, olives, one room for oil, one room for wines, one room for grapes. Incredible. There was enough food storage here during the time. And if you couldn't produce it and you were found in here, you would be prosecuted for it.
The watchtower.
Okay, guys.
The storehouses.
Of pillars that were developed by the engineers, and by the way, I just heard you mention Linda. He probably brought up engineers and builders from outside of Israel, and that's very true. He brought in the artisans, the best of the artisans from Alexandria, from Rome, from anywhere in the Roman world where the best would be found.
Mosaic flooring.
Here as well. This is just as legitimate as the one you saw there. That is a 3-roomed bathhouse. The cold room, the warm room, the hot room, or the frigidarium, the tepidarium, and the coldarium. This is the frigidarium. You'd enter in here. Fresco and polished painted walls that you see here. You might sit here for an hour or two while you were sitting and eating grapes and starting conversation and getting...
Tepidarium. And then this big hot room.
It's the same...
Pillars supporting the floor, through which the steam would come up.
Water purifies, and Jews essentially started
the floor since falling away.
Purifying in the first place. There was a roaring fire. That roaring fire created such an intense heat that it drafted that hot air into the room, emanating throughout this whole room and the pillars that you see on the floor, heating up the floor that was built on top of these pillars. Remember, these pillars are supporting you in the middle of the desert. Bathhouse, got plenty of food, water, swimming pools up here. Come back up the steep.
Okay, we look out onto the storerooms as we approach the Northern Palace Villa.
Had it been filled with water and the winds blew on it, it would cool it off, and those sitting in the middle would have reaped the benefit of it. And so that was probably where Herod had his dining room table set up, so he could view and enjoy dinner. Meanwhile, there was a secret staircase that could go up and connect all of these 3 tiers so that Herod could go up and down without being seen himself. Remember, if he could see the desert, they could also see him. This level was the only level that we found any rooms that might seem to are convinced of, is that this area of Masada was the hideaway for Herod. In other words, if all of Masada is a hideaway for Herod and for his entourage, this is the hideaway from the hideaway. Masada. And it was one of the plans and strategies of the Romans when they came here to take the zealots out. And what they did is they built this wall, about a 10-foot wall, that now has been destroyed because of earthquakes. But that 10-foot wall was supposedly to keep the Jews on the mountain at the same time as to protect the Romans in their camps. which brings us to those squares. Each of those squares are Roman camps. There were 8 of them in all, and they all circled the entire base. There was
The largest one.
leader of the zealots up here would stand where we are and shout down to Flavia Silva. Flavia Silva could shout back, and they hear each other. On a good day where it's very quiet in the desert, the ramp could stand on it and look down as slaves were laying lumber on top
And
of
here they
earth
could
and
see
top of
the work
rocks
being done
to
on
eventually
the
build a
ramp.
ramp that
From this
came
point,
all
on
the
this
way
hill.
up to, and we'll see it when we get up to it, Wadi to the right,
the
known as Wadi
model,
Masada.
I should say,
And
a
the one on the
full-size
south,
model
there's another Wadi
of the
we
battering
just barely
ram
make it out
that
over
would have
there.
been used
That's Wadi Ben Yair.
by the
And
Romans
the
to
aqueducts
bring
took
up
off
that
from there
ramp
and
to
brought
go
water
through the
straight
casement
over
walls
to
of
this
the
mountain.
zealots.
That's why they were able to bring it halfway up, because of the landscape in
This
this
was
area.
originally
If they
built
would have been able
for
to bring it all the way
the
up to
television
the top,
movie
they
Masada,
would
and
have,
then left
but they
here as an
couldn't.
artifact.
The ramp.
This is the most ancient bait knesset here at Masada. Not used as such during Herod's time, but certainly during the Zealots' time. Parchment was found, leading us to believe that in fact this was a bait knesset, and it was extracting the story of Ezekiel. Our group, of course, is easily identifiable by the hats. From that observation point, see that they could oversee the construction of
But a third wall,
the
and all
ramp
of it was building it to present
that led up to
pounding down the wall.
what was
Since they
the
knew
casement wall
where they were
that
coming,
was eventually
they were
finished.
able to have prepared the notice to build this double casemate wall. As it turned out, though, building.
Byzantine monastery church.
This is the
Was
this is that church. One of the earliest churches.
visible amidst the rubble, built in the 4th century and discovered later in the early 19th century. Its mosaic floor destroyed in the unfortunate method of transportation to London. And here again you see the example of the well-polished stones of Herod on the way into the palace. Very involved structure, casement walls allowing extra rooms later for the zealots use. And small quarters again used for families later time.
I think that this is an appropriate place to conclude the tour of Masada, mainly because of what we're looking at in terms of the archaeological remains of a beautiful 1st century mosaic floor, clearly indicating the decadence of our friend King Herod. And the structure that's built on top of it. Good going. Uh-oh. Find somebody who works on
Okay, these same rooms that were so ornately decorated were used by the zealots basically for just everyday survival, bring in storage and everything else, disregarding artwork present.
But beyond on this side of the summit,
Here he is.
but it was that was much larger, shallow. Anyhow, that was basically the nature of what you see here. But what's to the end of here is there's a mikveh and a bakery. There's a southern tower and a bakery.
They had to rebuild that with that just there.
Just the
Wonderful device. Press here. Press again. bits of the white. These artificial sandbars have been placed there by the Dead Sea Works. They act as a collection point for the various minerals.
Is that the
maze of sandbars?
But somebody went back with them?
That have been constructed.
Somebody went back with them?
What if a wolf would have done it? Gary?
Sodium, the various minerals they collect at certain points. Here we bid farewell to the Dead Sea.
David? Upon a Herzl suggested to develop the Dead Sea, and they encouraged it in those early years.
And here it comes the Dead Sea Works, which operates practically by remote control. Round the clock, year long.
Conditions that the workers are working in.
This is the magnesium factory, a cooperative venture with Volkswagen. Enter Timna National Park, Timna Park, for the copper mines. As a result of the erosion,
There was also areas that we found that smelting was carried out.
Slightly green hue is due to the high copper content.
They're looking at, although Solomon particularly didn't have any involvement
pillars.
here.
Solomon's pillar. Here's the ceiling that.
Oh, that was in Russia. I won't fit under this. Eric just got under there.
I bet we found an ancient camel. Where's all the
I'm talking about stuff that goes back right now to 200 to about the same time. Well, let's just say a little bit after Abraham.
This is a smelting camp. Obviously dates from close to 4,000 years ago. Time at which this was actively mined. We are now on the opposite side of the mountains where we saw the Pillars of Solomon.
It was
Wouldn't it be green then?
in process.
I don't smell anything. Wouldn't it be
This is
green
in process. This is something you should save.
Wouldn't it be green
You
then?
can see it over there too.
Wouldn't it be
Just
green?
let's remember who picked it up.
What?
There's the mushroom. Yeah.
This is the depiction of what was taking place right here, the furnace. This would have been the coke pile. And copper ore would have been poured in, the coke would have been added so as to raise the temperature, and the bellows would have been right to the side. Thus, the girth. And a rather incredible sight. Crossing between the two towns, between Aqaba and Eilat. Of course, we see the hotels.
That's all.
ברוכים הבאים למוסף ערבה. מוסף ערבה, זה ערבה קלאסית.
And welcome to Jordan. My name is Niazi.
Good morning.
My name is Niazi. I am from Petra. I have lived all my life there. I have born in one of the caves. I'm an archaeologist. Now I'm doing diving since 3 years after the excavation. 4th century AD. It was part of the trade routes of the caravan. Is considered as the main port of Jordan. It's the only exit for Jordan on the sea. So it is very important.
It's on the King's Highway on the way to the Amman area. Failing is due to various minerals, including copper, which is mined from this mountain.
Eric, you see? Do they do a lot of copper mining?
Village.
See where he's talking about? See?
Till 1994, there was just 3 hotels in this town. Now we have 63 hotels. Imagine.
Yeah, our town virtually didn't exist before 1970. Population lived primarily rock. Make our approach to Petra. All the horses that we'll take advantage of on the way out.
And take place after we enter into the canyon, the red canyons carved or formed inside the rock. Since after that the city will start on. But what we can see here in the outer part of Petra, the remains here of the water channels. You can see this cut goes all the way down. This used to bring with it the water all the way from the main entrance of town, the city of the Musa Spring, all the way down into Petra. And this channel later on will divide into 2 parts. One open for public use and another one closed with a pottery ceramic pipe to guarantee untouchable water on the houses, the palaces down within the city center. Now, this place was the first inhabitant on the whole regions of Petra, because when the Nabateans first came to Petra in the early for the agriculture, and then they start to move and live down here, and then when they grown and they become big populations by the 2nd century BC, they have moved down into the city of Petra. What you see here is the first connections between man and rock when they first arrive to Petra. Those are their houses. It is almost like a niches carved on the rock, regular shapes from inside as well as from the outside. But later on, by the beginning of the 2nd century, you see the house and the tombs become more organized. Like they went back to this rock with 2 sides of a cross step. This used to be a pyramid. This gave you an idea and impression the difference between the burial monument and the house monument. The house is very simple because they always think it is just for life, very short. While the life that was in the house forever and was for very long.
Caves such as these were still being used into the 1960s as primary residence, including for our guide. There was virtually no distinction between the more ornate on the inside and the simpler ones.
Which is an Egyptian influence. It is very much similar to other symbols of Egypt. And this was the first burial room upstairs, carved from the Nabateans' time in the 2nd century BC for one of the Nabateans' family. Later on, during the Roman time, in the 2nd century AD, they added the down floor monument, which is as you see more.
This pass here was created during Nabatean times to divert the waters so as to protect the canyon for the residents. It was reconstructed within the last 30 years, again, to protect the canyon, and it's been reinforced with retaining wall. And a narrow channel.
Untouchable water down into the city.
So this would have been the level of the road.
This is the level of the road. We will see it later on. But the first part was taken.
And then opening for pipe opener.
Petra and did some drawing, paintings, which is still very popular, and the arch was still standing.
Spanned.
So the record was still till 1987, and then it was fall down.
100 years
and then
ago.
both sides they have.
See all of them here. Chisel marks, the decorations, eroded columns, and niche for offering statues. Get a sense of how deep this canyon is.
Which was paved, as you see, and next to it they have set up the pottery pipe I have just mentioned before, which is used to take the water for the special use within the city. And on the left side, you can always see the remains of the water channel exist all the way. So just imagine you walk over the pavement and the closed water, running water all the way around you. Something.
So over time, this
Leonard, you wanted some water?
Now was this
a lot of sand because it has a
Shade into the sun, into the light.
channel. It has a water trough, this hole, which means that when you here you can get water and drink. Now opposite to it, you see there is an offering, which is most probably for the god of water, Munata, as an offering.
Street level. This is the original street level.
Now,
People
from
made
now
themselves
on, the road will go down. To reach this level, we have to take everything down.
This offering spot marks the halfway point into the canyon to the first of the monuments, and then an eroded watering hole to wash, leading to the stairs where one would light incense as part of the offering. A clear shot of precisely how the water ran along the street edge and offered fresh water to the rest.
Is the caravan? Yeah.
The camel. It's been done in Nabatean time again because it's a trade city. There's a clear pottery side of the pottery pipe that went through these channels and carried the water. And here we have an indication of the level of the original street, and the balance where we stand now, it was brought down by floods, would bring down the rubble from the upper area of the canyon. Here we become fascinated by the rock and the formation and everything else, and then we get our first glimpse of what lay beyond.
This is the first monument you see, and I do believe it wasn't carved here by consequence. It was meant to be in the main entrance as a pride monument, to be a witness for what they have achieved and reached that ancient time.
This was originally carved for Aratas III, 11th king of the Nabateans. The arches on the side were for the benefit of workmen to start at the top and then work their way down while working on the structure itself. Keys and tombs on the side was. Smile. Very nice, thank you. Though originally perhaps not the most beautiful structure here in the valley, the canyon, this is the most well preserved, as it was protected from erosion of both the water and the wind, reportedly 85% intact.
Piece of rock all carved and dug out to this size. All what you see is the natural colors of the rock. It has no painting, even it looks like painting.
Now beyond the entombment, was anything else conducted here?
No, it's just the rooms, the side of the building.
And some of the current residents of the area make out the donkey.
It's your birthday. What happened?
As we go down, one magnificent tomb after the other, all carved out of solid rock. Inside, you see that it's very comfortable, very residential.
I wonder if I could get a shot with my furnace in here.
We now set up to welcome visitors. Another example of an unfinished memorial. Again, the parallel mirror image steps indicate that it was begun, and this is where it would have been started at the top and yet not completed.
They become more open here in the side. Now I want to show you something very interesting. When you look here, you see the caves with a very small entrance, almost very similar in decoration. Those are the style of the houses. Now if you look to the other side, you see higher up, high monuments, no, tombs. You can see that the tombs are more interesting than the house. Now we put this scaffolding here. We want to go to show you some of the color. You wonder where this color comes from. Then we carry on to see the theater and more.
A recently uncovered meeting place. You can see along the wall where there was room for sitting.
Look nice.
Natural colors in the rock, which of course allows for the magnificent sand in this area.
Can you make it out?
Mm-hmm.
On the 2nd century AD, when the Roman occupied Petra in 106 AD, they took over the city, and they decided this is the location for the theater. So they have dug out many of the houses. We saw some of them being dug out, and the capacity of this theater is 30,000 people can be seated at one time. All carved out of the rock, the orchestra and the stage which was built from the same kind of sandstone which dug out of the theater itself.
Again, we see examples of the fantastic colors in the stone itself. Wow. Place of shade.
Did you take it?
No, I did not.
You can see the really very magnificent.
You can see the steps.
Many rooms.
See? The steps that haven't told you.
Here we are, one of the most beautifully decorated by nature bathrooms any of us has ever been in.
So you guys ready or heading back?
We're actually going back to, we're staying in a bar.
You're not going to go back to the lab.
You could not get this ideas if you didn't climb one of the mountains, like the high place of sacrifice up that hill. There you can see quite a panoramic view of the whole city of Petra from south to north, east to west. But from this point here, what I can say, like 10 different tours can be conducted, each tour for a whole day explorations, whether to climb high places or to go south or west or north to visit many of the beautiful places and materials had carved and built here and there. What you see now to the front of us here, this vanishes of the fascinating monument, what we call it the Nabateans' royal tombs. The urn tomb is the one in the front of us, which has a number of arches, stone built below, which has been added during the Byzantine time when it was converted to be the main Byzantine church in Petra in the year of 447 from the Greek inscriptions was founded inside. Originally it was carved to be a tomb on the Nabateans' time. Then the biggest other two, the Corinthian one in the middle, and the last one which is carved on the style of the Roman palaces, what we call it the palace tomb. As you see, those used to be very important and very beautiful monuments, but they are very much eroded as they are often to the wind and the rain and the humidity, so all what's left like 15%. It was in the 7th century AD.
Which one?
Seventh. Yes.
7th century.
Yes. Now we start doing some excavation. As you see, the carving places was not excavated, they are like this found. But the city stone, the building part, we are in the process of doing some excavations, like the winged lion temples down there and the sheltered one. It is a Byzantine church recently rediscovered 2 years ago, and it has 100 square meters of a very beautiful mosaics for the first time in Petra. Farther back, behind the mountains, we have the monastery, a beautiful monument, very big, very impressive, like the one, like the treasure house we just saw back there. To climb there, you need to go over 950 steps.
Did you just find that now? Such a cute baby. Thank you so much. You
Put it wherever you catch it.
There's a little one over here, Charles.
Eric, don't go near them.
Eric, come here, honey.
It's okay. It's okay. I don't have a knife.
More of them over here.
So we begin to leave Petra.
What?
One last look at some of the marvelous work. It's wonderful caverns, canyons. And off they go. On the way out of Petra. All the way. Okay. Lovely.
You can manage with the camera?
I'm managing sort of.
Sempre relax. It's
5, 6.
unpolished. Look at some of the equipment that's used in the polishing and cutting process.
only copper. And the copper is done from this beautiful stone, rocks that we find in the mines. Yes, pieces of rock like this. Why we call it Elat stone? There are many copper mines all over the world. In Russia, in South Africa, in South America. Malachite. This is copper carbonate. What makes Elat stone so special is the blue color in powder. That's why he say that he is a slave. It's very dangerous, and I'm afraid to cut my hand. He have experience.
What type of blade is it? I'm sorry.
Diamond.
Diamond.
Yes. And what he says, he have an extra finger also, if something happened to him, he shows it. But I am afraid. Anyhow, the stone is stick on this, and with this, we cut the stone. This is a special machine for specially, like keys, copies, yes? And it makes the beads. For this. This is for very special, beautiful stones to do a special design. After the stone is cut, but the process in the computer and here is the same process. After we cut the stone, we polish it here, and to absorb the beautiful color from the stone, we use cotton with wax.
Final shape, we went around the edges with this machine here, carborundum, a grinder. We smooth them down. And roll. And we polish the stone with this machine here, cloth and wax paraffin. Well, you probably know that the paraffin is made from oil. Oil does not stick on a wet stone on water. I must let the stone dry completely. Here it does. I should polish a dry piece instead. With a drop of water you can see the colors through. But the water evaporates, the colors will disappear in a second. With paraffin they stay forever.
Excuse me.
Malachite has the right. The green color, the malachite is a very common stone. You may find it all over the world. In Russia, Zaire, Congo, Peru, Zimbabwe, Mexico. Only in a Elat stone you find the two colors together.
Looks like a picture.
Huh?
It looks like a picture. It's perfect.
Oh, there's another one over there. This one is still good.
Good chance to see some of the underwater light.
It's really the best ball for freshman. The best picture of the map. Map of the area.
Pillikala. Kato mikä pillikala.
Älä mene siihen häihin.
Don't say anything here. School of cornfish. Look. There's the elephant. Tail. Tail.
From the observation deck of the underwater observatory, we see Egypt, Red Sea, Saudi Arabia, and then over here is Jordan, actually site of the King's Palace, and tourists, and then Israel. Again, from the top of the observatory, you can clearly distinguish the coral right along the coast of the beach in Eilat. Here we are, shark school. Plenty of sharks.
Ahí lo detienes, pues se rompe el vidrio.
Eso.
¿No era?
Salían todos los nuestros.
Gary? Eric? Eric?
On va chercher à respirer. Flotte dans l'eau déjà. Viens là. Venez tous les deux comme ça. 100 mètres de plus bas.
Put that down tight over your nose. A couple of seconds. That's easy for you. Not as hard as that one. That one? It's extra here. It's nice. Mom, what? If the snorkel's bothering you, don't.
Leonard! Leonard!
Look at Daddy. Look at Daddy. Yeah, we're going out that way. Come on. Come on, Dad. Stay together. Stay together. Wait a second.
City of Eilat. Family snorkeling.
On the way out to the landing, we jump off into the water. You can see some coral and some fish. It's just in the dock. Coming in. Another pretty example of sea life.
Now we're going straight up north, and then we're pulling off to the west, right? Going along the south.
As we leave Eilat, we hit the mountains along the Sinai border. We're pulling off to the west of it.
The strains of black that you see in here are the black basalt, because in ancient geological...
Still a number of bunkers left from the time of hostilities with Egypt, tucked in amongst the mountains.
And petrol with all those different curls
Down
and
into the valley.
colors. Did you bring any rocks home? This is purely for military and diplomatic. But what you see here is There's a classic difference between the Israelis and the Egyptians. The Israelis got the Mercedes sitting out there in front of doing his miluim, his reserve duty. This is the Egyptians. The Egyptian's got his doors open. He has no...
That's not vegetation.
No, that's some kind of an electric station.
It's the Egyptian
You
balloon.
know, you sometimes see them patrolling
The Egyptian watchtower.
It's really neat. Right along the shoulder. 2 or 3 cameras and soldiers sitting on top. So double.
Egypt, there's Sinai, this border point. General overview. Various mountains and wadis.
The hard crust broke because of earthquake. The movement of rushing water, remember by this time, as there were recessions in the sea, what was left was gushing rivers that carved out valleys.
Here we are at the rim.
Waiting for you.
Right here.
They're waiting for you over here.
At the ridge of Ramon crater, formed by various geological events, including earthquakes and then rushing rivers, hollowing out a mountain. What we see, essentially, is the edge of the crust of the mountain. There's a crusty character right there. Here we have folks who are taking advantage of the cliffs and are about to go rappelling down the sheer edges of the crater. Thinking better of the entire affair, the young woman decided to invest otherwise, look forward to a future on her feet. We have another candidate. There's a bathroom on the way down.
תסתכל עליך, צלם אותה.
יופי.
כל המכנסיים שלה נפלו.
תורידי את הרגליים כלפי מטה.
Here we are entering the wadi, simulated wadi that was built in honor of Ben Gurion's love of the desert, and his wife Paula gravesite for the promotion. Gan Lumi Paula with David Ben Gurion. Come along the pathway, gives us that wadi feel.
Other young people in Israel to develop. He once said that God created man, but God created the desert so that man could create. That is, that it was a desert area so that we could put our creativity into full gear. And Korean had dreamed for the Negev. His vision of just like the American Wild West. Here in the development of the Negev, just a number of towns and villages throughout the Negev. There are kibbutzim throughout the Negev. And it proves that we are able to accomplish, if we put our heads together, almost what would seem impossible. He once wrote that his life never began until he arrived in Israel. Everything that happened before was unimportant. That's why there are two...
And here we are at the overlook of Midbar scene was in a sin. Ben Gurion's gravesites. Stable care, where he chose to settle. The home Prime Minister, first Prime Minister of Israel.
Is this how you found everything?
With various travel gifts from head to state. Bedroom with books stacked beside his bed. An insomniac spent most of his evenings and nights reading. And great fan of Mahatma Gandhi. Kitchen. Collins room, which I think doubled as a sitting room. Extensive library.
I think it was fonts.
And a few books he himself read. And here we are at Beartubia. Some of the cows. The guests. And two of the residents. אילנה. מה את שמה? איך קוראים לך?
לינדה, תגידי להם שיזהרו, תסתכלי עליה.
עדי? איך קוראים לך?
עדי, נו.
ובת כמה את, עדי? בת שלוש? בת שלוש, אוקיי.
בת שלוש.
אוקיי, בבקשה, איך קוראים לך? רות. ואת בת? 10, נכון? כן. יופי, תודה.
ובתוך הרפת?
אוקיי, מדליכה. אוקיי, בסדר. Are you taking a sample or what? You pick each one a little?
בעברית או באנגלית?
באנגלית, כי זה גם...
This is an Israeli developed milking machine called afikim, and it's automatically measure the milk here. When I see the results up here, it can be connected to computers also. And once the cow is finished, it waits about 20 seconds, and if there's no milk command going up to here, it's automatically shut off the air. And take that off automatically also. Look on this cow. See there's hardly any milk going out. Down here you can see. So once it stops, it's waiting about 20 seconds. And soon you'll see how it comes off by itself.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't continue to milk the cow when there's no milk left. It doesn't continue to draw when there's no milk.
Yes, which if it does, it's not good for the cow.
Right, can you painful and whatever.
Yeah, it can cause their mastitis or something like that.
The bar comes down. In this top area. And now
small line of 18 cows on this side, starting with them, the other one with the highest pregnancy, closer to the calf.
Okay, we're here. Now walk in.
But they want to get them wet on the udder. So if she's not clean, I clean it with the paper. A very useful thing to do with newspaper. My grandfather used to do the other thing with it, but I just thought we're giving them a shower before the milking to cool them.
That's how much milk coming in. It makes milk.
Once milk is being brought here, the milk is then siphoned off and then into the inside. Samples are taken to determine the bacteria level. These pipes are still warm. The milk comes into the back tub and then pours out these pipes. Into the cooling and then immediately into the tank. Okay, here we are in David, Lulu, and Zohara's house. This was built just 2 years ago on the same property that had belonged to Chaim, her grandparents, and you can see an interesting wall construction there. Very lovely home. And we're going out into the yard. He is Amir's son, and this is Zahara. And this is Ruth, our guide, Zahara's middle girl. And there we see Adi again. And we're in the yard. כן, רק אנגלית, זאת הבעיה.
לא נכון שלנו מדברת עברית.
אבל זה פעל, בגלל שזה פעל. רוני! יאללה. רות או טרזן, לא חשוב את השם. יופי! יופי, להתראות. רגע. עוד? Whoa! Oh, Olympics! Yay! Yummy.
Herschel. Is that the flavor? Herschel. No, not his son.
Children were with us.
Okay, you want to give it out? I'll take pictures.
Okay. בבקשה, פנים, אני צריכה פנים פה. אוקיי, זהו. אז מה זה? בסדר. זהרה? עם יעל. She ran away. אמיר שם, ליד האש, ליד הברבקיו. אמיר. Nalma, Simpson's husband. Okay. Take a good picture of him. David, Dudu. He's married to Zahara. So brothers-in-law speaking, Amir. And of course Yaakov's back. And Roni, Zahara's daughter, the youngest. And Adi, Amir's daughter.
וסלם ואילת.
And Lior, Adi's brother, and his mom is Nili, and his daddy is Amir. Okay. Here's Nili. Yes.
כבר היה, תגובת היום. לא, היה מים. בביר היה כל הזמן.
Okay. Shimshin, Nama's husband, and Peretz. Peretz, and Koka. There's Koka. And here's Noga, having
Making a lot of trouble for all of us.
Okay, and the back. Okay, barely see. Okay, parents and
Last night, I didn't know your sister.
נעמה, את תהיי המתורגמן. בואי, נעמה. ברוכים הבאים הנה. כל שנה אנחנו מזמינים אתכם הנה, וגם את כל חלק מאולבני שלא היו עוד אצלנו.
Saratoga.
You have an annual invitation, including everyone from Albany who hasn't been here.
אצל אילנה ויעקב בן יהושע באר טוביה.
The address is well known, Ilana and Yaakov Beltuvia.
Been wonderful, wonderful. We're not even related, and it's been wonderful.
That's why it has been so wonderful.
But also, I would like to say this is our bar mitzvah boy soon. Our oldest grandson, my husband and mine, and l'chaim to Gary.
Gary, mazal tov. In advance.
Okay, I'm done. Perfect.
Hey, David.
To come for dessert.
Mom. Wait 1 second. I don't know